Jeremiah Thompson was a man who had always believed in the dignity of hard work, the power of honesty, and the justice he had fought for since his youth. Growing up in a small southern town, his family, like many other black families, had to adapt to a world steeped in both overt and subtle discrimination. But Jeremiah was resilient. Now an adult, he used every opportunity to help others, believing that even small changes could improve someone's life. That evening, he had stayed late at the local youth center, where he taught kids from underprivileged families simple skills: construction, car repairs, and even cooking. He knew how important it was to give children hope and belief that they could achieve more. However, his journey home that evening turned into a nightmare. The road through the forest, which he often drove, was deserted and dark, except for the headlights of his old pickup truck. Just as he began to relax, thinking about the warm dinner and the loving welcome awaiting him at home, red and blue lights flared in his rearview mirror. A police siren pierced the silence, and a familiar chill settled in his heart. He pulled over to the side of the road, trying to breathe deeply and keep himself composed. Two white officers stepped out of the patrol car and approached his vehicle. He recognized them: Hargrove and Lewis, two of the town's so-called law enforcers, though their methods were far from just. People in town whispered about their abuse of power, especially against black residents, but there was never enough evidence to hold them accountable. And now, here they were. "License and registration," Hargrove barked, shining a flashlight directly into Jeremiah's eyes. Trying not to show his irritation, Jeremiah silently handed over the requested documents. He knew that every word, every move, could escalate the situation. "Step out of the car," Lewis added. His voice was cold, with a thinly veiled air of menace. Jeremiah knew he had no choice. Slowly opening the door, he stepped out of the car, raising his hands to show he posed no threat. "Is there a reason for this stop, officers?" he asked calmly, though his voice carried an undertone of tension. "A reason?" Hargrove smirked. "You're the reason." Before Jeremiah could grasp the meaning behind their words, Hargrove grabbed him by the arm and shoved him toward the dark forest lining the road. Lewis followed closely, his hand hovering over his weapon. Jeremiah didn't resist, but each step was heavy with fear and anger. They walked several dozen yards into the woods until the light from the road disappeared behind the dense trees. Finally, they stopped, and Hargrove tossed a rusty, dirt-stained shovel at Jeremiah's feet. "Start digging," he ordered with a cruel grin. "Digging?" Jeremiah looked at him, trying to mask his growing panic. "What for?" "For your grave," Lewis added with a smirk, as if this were all some twisted joke. But there was no humor in their eyes. Jeremiah knew these men believed they were untouchable. Their reputation preceded them. Threats, intimidation, and humiliation were part of their daily routine. But this time, they had made a fatal mistake. These two didn't realize who his wife was. Eleanor Thompson, the district's chief judge, was renowned for her uncompromising fight for justice and her fierce intolerance of corruption. They don't even know what they're doing, Jeremiah thought, maintaining his calm demeanor. Before stepping out of his car, he had managed to activate an emergency alert on his phone. It was a precaution he and Eleanor had set up, a system designed for situations exactly like this. "Dig," Hargrove barked again, shoving him toward the shovel. Jeremiah picked up the tool and began digging, but his mind was already far ahead. Remembering the lessons his mother had taught him, he prayed silently and gathered his strength. Being calm doesn't mean being weak, his father used to say. The sound of sirens shattered the night silence, freezing both officers in their tracks. They exchanged puzzled looks, unsure of what was happening. The glare of headlights sliced through the darkness of the forest, and the crunch of approaching footsteps grew louder. Hargrove and Lewis turned, and Jeremiah stopped digging, letting the shovel fall. At the edge of the woods, patrol cars pulled to a halt, and at the forefront of the group stood her. Lena Thompson strode toward them with quick, confident steps. She wore her signature tailored suit, and her expression was a mixture of fury and determination. Her presence was so commanding that even Hargrove, who rarely showed fear, felt his confidence waver. "What's going on here?" she demanded, her voice ringing out like a bell in the night. Hargrove started to stammer something, but Eleanor raised her hand, silencing him. Her gaze shifted to Jeremiah, who stood upright despite the dirt and exhaustion. His expression radiated dignity. "These two men forced my husband to dig his own grave," she said, her voice steely. "And now they'll answer for it." Behind her, federal agents moved in to arrest the officers, confiscating their weapons and beginning the formal process of detaining them. Hargrove and Lewis protested, but it was futile. Eleanor watched their arrest with cold resolve while her husband stood beside her, now protected. The next day, the story made national headlines. Chief Judge's husband forced to dig grave by corrupt officers. Footage from the officers' body cameras, which they had forgotten to disable, provided undeniable proof of their guilt. The public outrage was immediate and widespread. Protests erupted in the town, demanding accountability and systemic reform. An independent investigation uncovered years of abuse tied to Hargrove and Lewis. Complaints from black residents, once ignored, were finally taken seriously. Eleanor used her position to ensure the investigation was thorough and impartial, working tirelessly to dismantle the toxic culture within the police department. On the day of the officers' sentencing, the courtroom was packed with people who came to support Jeremiah and witness justice being served. Eleanor, though recusing herself from overseeing the case, delivered a powerful statement as a witness. "This case is not just about my husband," she said, her voice steady and filled with emotion. "It is about every black man and woman who has been silenced, terrorized, or killed by those who were supposed to protect them. This is about justice, not just for Jeremiah, but for every name we've forgotten." Hargrove and Lewis were convicted on multiple charges, including unlawful detainment, abuse of power, and attempted murder. Their sentencing marked a turning point for the community, which had long lived in fear of unchecked police brutality. Standing on the courthouse steps after the trial, Jeremiah addressed the crowd gathered to support him. "They tried to bury me," he said, his voice strong and unwavering. "But instead, they unearthed the truth, and the truth will always prevail." Eleanor stood beside him, her hand resting firmly on his shoulder. "This victory is not the end," she added. "It's the beginning. We still have work to do, but today we showed that no one is above the law." The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices filled with hope and determination. As Jeremiah and Eleanor walked away hand in hand, they knew the fight wasn't over, but they were ready to continue it.